I want to remind you today that just because you're alone doesn't mean you're abandoned. Just because you're walking by yourself doesn't mean you're walking in weakness. People may look at you and wonder why you're not surrounded, why you're not leaning on someone else, why you're not always in a crowd. But they don't understand what God is doing in your isolation. There's a strength building inside you. There's a focus, a clarity, a power that doesn't come when you're distracted, when you're catering to everyone else's expectations. Sometimes God pulls you away not to punish you, but to prepare you. Being alone isn't a curse, it's a calling. And when you learn to embrace the silence, you'll hear things that the noise never let you catch. Aloneness doesn't mean emptiness. It can be the very space where destiny is shaped. That's where you become rooted. That's where you grow wings. So don't despise the season where it's just you, because being alone is a power. There's something deeply transformational about the moment when life quiets down and you find yourself standing alone. It's in those times when there are no distractions, no voices around you offering opinions, and no one to lean on but your own spirit. You begin to truly hear what's been inside of you all. When you're surrounded by people, responsibilities, noise, and expectations, it can be easy to lose touch with who you really are. But when you're alone, when it's just you and your thoughts, you start to see yourself without the filters and projections of others. That's where real awareness begins. So often we think power is surrounded, in having a network, a crowd, a cheering section. Not the presence, but the presence of your true self, your true self, your true self, but the presence of your true self. The version of you that doesn't perform, doesn't impress, doesn't hide. In those moments of solitude, you begin to understand your patterns, your strengths, your wounds, and your needs. You're not distracted by roles and expectations. You are just present, raw, real, and open. And the beauty of that openness is that it allows growth to take root. Not surface level change, but deep foundational transformation. The kind that doesn't come from outside validation, but from inner revelation. Sometimes the only way to uncover what's broken inside is to get alone long enough to feel it. And sometimes the only way to discover what's brilliant inside is to be quiet enough. Hear it. There are gifts, callings, ideas, visions, and strength hidden inside you that cannot be discovered in They only surface when you're still. When you're alone, you're forced to face your own reflection. And while that can be uncomfortable, it's also where healing begins. You begin to realize what matters and what doesn't. You start to see which voices you've been following that never should have had authority in your life. You start identifying the lies you've believed, lies that told you that you're not enough unless you're approved, unless you're accompanied, unless you're chosen by someone else. But when you stand alone and realize that you still stand, you understand that your strength isn't borrowed from someone else. It's been in you the entire time. That's not weakness. That's power. That's not punishment. Being alone doesn't mean you're less. It often means you're being pulled deeper. There's a depth to people who've walked alone for a season. They're not easily shaken. They're not waiting for someone to save them. They've discovered how to stand on their own. And when you can stand on your own, then you're ready to walk into rooms, into relationships, into opportunities, not as someone needy. And in that place of aloneness, you also develop a sensitivity to things that others miss. You begin to hear what's not said. You begin to see what others overlook. That quiet gives you insight. That space gives you discernment. And there's a reason why some of the greatest breakthroughs in life are born in isolation. The ideas that change the world often begin in silence. The revelations that shift generations don't usually come in the noise of the crowd, but in the whisper of stillness. Even in your faith, there's a deeper level of trust that gets developed when you don't have anyone else to lean on. When it's just you in the quiet, you learn how to be led not by feelings, but by conviction. You begin to walk not by sight, but by vision. You begin to depend not on people, but on promise. And that kind of inner strength, once it's built, can't be taken from you. It's yours. It's solid. It's lasting. Some people spend their whole lives trying to avoid being alone, thinking it means something is wrong. But what if being alone is exactly what's right? What if it's not a sign that you're forgotten, but a sign that you're being formed? What if that silence is not absence, but invitation? An invitation to step away from everything familiar so you can finally meet the person you were born to be. You don't have to fear that space. You don't have to rush to fill it with noise, with people, with distraction. You can embrace it. You can lean into it, because in that space, you will find yourself. You will find truth. You will find strength you never knew you had. And when you come out of that season, you'll walk differently. Not because someone else carried you through it, but because you carried something powerful out of it. So if you find yourself in a season where you feel alone, don't be discouraged. Don't think it means you're weak or unwanted. It may just mean you're in the most important season of your life. A season where the real you is being built. And once you tap into that strength, you'll never see alone the same way again. You'll know being alone is not a disadvantage. It's not a setback. Being alone is a power. There are moments in life when it seems like you're being pulled back, set aside, or even forgotten. People stop calling. Doors stop opening. The pace slows down and you're left wondering why everything seems quiet. But what you might not realize, that this space, silence, this season of solitude, it's not punishment. It's not delay. It's preparation for something greater. Sometimes before God elevates you, He isolates you. He pulls you away from the noise, from the crowd, even from comfort. Because what's ahead of you requires a version of you that's more focused, more refined, and more anchored. Think about the process of launching an arrow. Before it flies forward, it has to be pulled back. The further it's pulled back, the further it's destined to go. The same principle applies in your life. The tension, the distance, the silence, it's not to hold you down, it's to launch you further. You're not being buried, you're being planted. And something planted always breaks through, always rises again. But first, must grow in the dark. Isolation often precedes elevation because elevation demands preparation. You can't take the old mindset into the new level. You can't carry old habits into new territory. You can't bring everyone with you where you're going. And sometimes the only way to truly shed what's no longer meant for you is to be separated from it. When you're alone, there's no one to impress, no one to please, no one to distract you. Just the raw opportunity to grow, to dig deep and to listen. It's in isolation that you learn to depend on something greater than yourself. You stop running to people for approval. You stop chasing validation. You begin to look up and lean in. You develop trust that's not based on your surroundings, but on your source. And when that trust grows, you become unshakable. Not because you've never been shaken, but because you were shaken in private and now you're solid in public. Some of the most powerful people in history spent time in isolation before their elevation. Joseph was alone in a prison before he stepped into the palace. Moses was alone in the wilderness before he led a nation. David was alone with sheep before he stood before giants. Jesus went into the desert alone before he stepped into his divine mission. Over and over again we see the power Separation, then elevation. Distance, then destiny. Silence, then strength. Maybe the reason it feels lonely right now is because you're in the stretch before the launch. Maybe the silence is not the absence of purpose, but the protection of it. Maybe you're not being overlooked, you're being overhauled. And the version of you that will come out of this will be stronger, wiser, and more prepared than the one who went in. Sometimes God doesn't allow the crowd to come with you because He doesn't want you to depend on applause. He wants you to know that your assignment is not about being seen. It's about being faithful. And when the time is right, He'll bring you into places you couldn't have reached if you were still holding on to the things He asked you to let go of. If you try to avoid isolation, you might miss your preparation. If you resist the pullback, you might miss the launch. Don't curse the quiet seasons. Don't fight the separation. What feels like a setback may actually be a setup. You're being aligned for something greater, and the solitude is part of the process. It's where your character is forged. It's where your vision becomes clear. It's where your identity is secure. Not by what you do, not by who surrounds you, but by who you are and who you belong to. When you come out of this season, you won't need to announce yourself. Your growth, speak. Your strength, you'll speak. Your peace, your clarity, your resilience. It will all speak, and people will wonder how you got there. They'll ask what changed. And the truth will be, you didn't grow in the spotlight. You grew in the shadow. You didn't become powerful in the presence of the crowd. You became powerful when it was just you alone, trusting, stretching, becoming. So don't be discouraged by isolation. Don't view it as a sign of rejection. View it as a sign that you're being entrusted with more. That you're not being left behind. You're being a part that what's coming is too important to be built on shallow foundations. And sometimes the only way to build deep is to dig in silence, away from the noise, away from the familiar. Remember this. Elevation doesn't start on the stage. It starts in solitude. It starts when nobody's watching. It starts when it's just you and God, shaping, molding, preparing. So stand strong in the quiet season. Something powerful is being formed. And when the time comes, the world won't just see your rise. Feel the power of everything you built when you were alone. There are times in life when people begin to fade, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and relationally. You look around and realize that the ones you thought would always be there slowly go quiet. The ones you counted on begin to drift. The connections you believed were unbreakable start to weaken. And it's in those moments, when you feel the sting of absence, that a deeper revelation begins to unfold. Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. There's some people who are only assigned to your life for a chapter, not the whole book. And being alone gives you the clarity to see who's truly with you and who is just around for the benefits. Sometimes you don't recognize the weight people have on your life until they step away. You begin to see who really poured into you and who simply pulled from you. You notice who prayed for you and who just preyed on your kindness. You understand who celebrated your growth and who only stayed close as long as they were ahead of you. The truth is, when everything is going well, when you're shining and surrounded, it's easy for people to stick around. But when the applause dies down, when the spotlight moves, when you find yourself in the valley instead of the mountain, that's when real loyalty is revealed. Being alone doesn't just strip away distractions. It exposes foundations. It shows you which relationships were built on purpose and which were built on convenience. It helps you discern between those who loved you and those who loved what you gave them. And while that revelation can be painful, it is also powerful. Because once you know who's really with you, you can walk with a different confidence You no longer depend on quantity, you value quality. You stop entertaining what drains you and start protecting what fuels you. But even deeper than revealing who's around you, being alone also reveals who has never left you. When the crowd thins out, when the phone stops ringing, when you feel like it's just you in the fight, there is a quiet yet unshakable presence that never abandons you. It's in that silence that you recognize you were never truly. Even in the emptiest of rooms, you can feel peace holding you. Even in the stillness, there's guidance. Even in the absence of people, there's presence. Strong, steady, sacred. That's when your faith becomes more than word. That's when it becomes personal. Because you realize that the presence that walked with you in joy also stayed with you in sorrow. The same presence that cheered with you on the mountaintop sat with you in the valley. You begin to understand that even if every voice goes silent, there's still one that speaks, still one that comforts, still one that carries. Aloneness teaches you that you don't have to fear being without people, because you are never without purpose. You are never without power. You are never without presence. And once you know that, really know it, you become unshakable. You stop settling for half-hearted connections. You stop chasing people who were never meant to stay. You stop begging for seats at tables you were never meant to sit at. Being alone gives you the wisdom to walk away from what's not real and the strength to wait for what is. You stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, and overcompensating. You stand in truth. You walk in clarity. You trust in what's solid, not in what's flashy. And when people do show up, the real ones, the aligned ones, the purpose-connected ones, you recognize them not by how loud they shout, but by how steady they stand. There's a refining that happens in solitude, a clearing the fog, a removal of the clutter. You come to know that your peace matters more than popularity. Your purpose matters more than people-pleasing. And when that truth settles in your spirit, you no longer feel desperate to belong, because you finally belong to yourself. You finally understand your value. And with that understanding comes freedom. The freedom to walk away, the freedom to say no, the freedom to stand tall even when you stand alone. So if you're in a season right now where people have stepped away, where relationships have shifted, where you feel like the phone is silent and the room is empty, don't panic. Don't assume you've lost. You might have just started winning. Because this is where the truth is being revealed. This is where your discernment is being sharpened. This is where you discover who's really with you. And most importantly, who's always been with you. The real ones don't leave in the storm. They stand with you even in the wind. And the one who promised never to leave you, never to forsake you, he's still right there. So don't mourn what walked away. Celebrate what stayed and walk boldly in the power to stand. There's a power in silence that most people never tap into. A depth that remains unexplored because we're too often surrounded by noise. Not just external noise, but internal noise too. The noise of worry, pressure, comparison, and expectation. We live in a world that celebrates loud voices, constant motion, and being surrounded by others. But what if the very breakthrough you've been praying for, the conversation or the chaos, what if it's in the quiet? When you are alone, when the room is still and no one else is talking, something beautiful happens. Your mind begins to clear, your heart begins to settle, and your soul begins to speak. There are ideas that won't come to you in the middle of noise. There are visions that require a different frequency, a quieter one. When you step away from the rush, you create space for inspiration. You open the door to insight. You unlock creativity that's been buried under constant movement. Some of the greatest creations in history were born in the quiet. Some of the most brilliant minds, the boldest inventions, the most powerful revelations didn't come from public places or crowded rooms. They came from solitude. Why? Because silence gives ideas room to breathe. When you're alone, you're not filtering your thoughts through someone else's opinions. You're not second-guessing your instincts because of the fear of being judged. In that space, your ideas are pure, they're honest. They're not shaped by approval, they're shaped by authenticity. There is something sacred about being able to sit with yourself uninterrupted and dream. You begin to see possibilities you couldn't see when your attention was divided. You begin to make connections between things you didn't even realize were related. That's the power of stillness. It lets your thoughts stretch out. It lets your creativity expand. And when it does, it births things that can't be forced in a crowd. They have to be revealed in stillness. Most people avoid that stillness because they confuse it with boredom or loneliness. But there's a difference between being alone and being empty. You can be alone and full of thoughts, full of vision, full of clarity. In fact, being alone might be the very thing you need to refill, to recharge, to reconnect with your own voice. Because too often we're trying to create, decide, or build while being pulled in 100 directions. No wonder we feel stuck. No wonder our ideas feel flat. We haven't given ourselves space to hear what's really inside. You don't need to fly across the world to find inspiration. You don't need a conference or a crowded event. Sometimes all you need is a quiet room, a still moment, and the courage to go within. When the world grows quiet, your inner world speaks louder. That's where the blueprint comes from. That's where divine downloads drop into your spirit. That's where God whispers answers you've been begging to hear, but couldn't catch because of all the other voices. Sometimes the reason God allows us to walk through seasons of aloneness is because He wants to give us something too precious to be shared in public. He wants to place something in you so unique, so tailor-made for your journey, that it has to be given in a private place. When you're alone, He doesn't have to fight for your attention. He doesn't have to compete with the opinions of others. He has your full focus, and in that He can reveal the next step, the next idea, the next assignment. Your imagination is your God-given gift, but like any gift, it needs space to be unwrapped. Being alone gives you that space. It frees you from distractions and makes room for revelation. And some of the ideas you're carrying now, they're waiting for you to get quiet enough to hear them. They're waiting for the noise to die down so they can rise up. When you learn to honor the quiet spaces, you start to see them not as empty, but as full of potential. You stop rushing to fill the silence, start leaning into it. You begin to cherish those moments alone, because you realize they're not wasted, they're fertile. Something is growing there. Something is being born there. And when the time is right, what was developed in the dark will shine in the light. So don't be afraid of the quiet. Don't run from solitude. Don't resist being alone. Because your greatest ideas, your boldest dreams, your clearest answers, they're not out there. They're in you. And being alone is the power that unlocks them. There's something exhausting about always chasing. Chasing people, chasing approval, chasing validation, chasing love. But it's like you're running on a treadmill that never stops, pouring your energy into trying to be seen, trying to be enough, trying to earn a place. But when you learn to be alone, when you embrace solitude, something inside of you shifts. You begin to realize that what you've been running after was never outside of you. It was always something you needed to find within. Being alone forces you to face yourself. Not the version you show the world, not the edited image you post online, but the real you, unfiltered, honest you. And while that kind of self-discovery can be uncomfortable, it's also liberating. Because once you find yourself, you stop living for applause. You stop bending to fit into molds. You stop shrinking to make others feel comfortable. You stand taller, you walk freer, you live fuller. Because you're no longer trying to become someone else. You've come home to yourself. And when you know who you are, you stop chasing things that don't belong to you. You stop knocking on doors that were never meant to open. You stop settling for less just because you're afraid of being alone. You begin to understand that your value doesn't come from who chooses you, who calls you, or who stays with you. Your value was built in from the beginning. It's not earned by association, it's embedded by design. So many people end up in unhealthy relationships, toxic friendships, and unfulfilling roles. Not because they don't deserve better, but because they don't believe they're enough without someone else's approval. But when you've walked through a season of solitude, when you've spent time getting to know your own soul, you realize that you don't need someone else to complete you. You are already whole. You are not half of a person waiting to be rescued. You are complete, chosen, and equipped all on your own. And what's even more powerful is that once you find yourself, you become someone others are drawn to, not because you need them, but because you've become magnetic in your strength. People are drawn to authenticity. They're drawn to peace. They're drawn to someone who doesn't chase because it's rare. It's rare to see someone who is content, whole, and anchored all by themselves. So if you're in a season right now where it's just you, where the phone is quiet, where the room feels empty, where the connections are few, don't see it as a deficit. See it as development. You are not missing. You are leveling up. You are being refined. This is the space where your roots grow deep. This is the place where you stop running after others and start running toward your purpose. You don't need to chase when you've found yourself, because what's meant for you will always find you. And when it does, you won't have to lose yourself to keep it. You'll already be whole, already be steady, already be strong. And that right there is the power of being alone.
It's easy to assume that if you're alone, you must be missing something. That if you're not surrounded, not constantly connected, not publicly affirmed, then maybe something is wrong. But that's not the truth. Being alone doesn't mean you're lacking. It doesn't mean you've fallen behind. It doesn't mean life passed you by. Sometimes being alone is the clearest sign that something powerful is being deposited inside of you. You're not being forgotten, you're being equipped. There are some things God can only do in you when it's just you. There are lessons too deep, blessings too heavy, and callings too specific to be poured into a crowded, noisy life. So He lovingly and strategically draws you into a space where it's quiet, where the distractions fall away, where the opinions fade. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because what He wants to build in you requires deep roots. And deep roots are grown in private. When you're alone, you're not empty, you're available to be molded, reshaped and infused with fresh strength. The outside world may not see what's happening, but something is shifting on the inside. You're becoming more focused, more grounded, more discerning, and your capacity is being enlarged. You see, there are certain kinds of wisdom that can only come through solitude. When you're no longer depending on the noise to guide you, your spirit becomes attuned to the quiet nudges. You begin to hear more clearly. You begin to sense what others miss. You get instructions that don't come from books or crowds, they come from heaven. And when you emerge from that season, you're not the same. You're stronger, you're wiser, you're equipped. Some of the greatest callings require the deepest equipping. And some of the deepest equipping requires time alone. You don't build spiritual stamina when everything is easy. You don't learn endurance when you're always being carried. You learn to stand when there's no one else to lean on. You learn to walk when there's no crowd to follow. You learn to lead when you've walked through the valley by yourself and found out that God was your guide all along. Don't misinterpret your season. Just because others can't see what's happening doesn't mean nothing is happening. You may be in a season where you're not being seen, but you are being shaped. You're not being celebrated, but you are being strengthened. You're not being invited, but you are being instructed. There's purpose in the process, even if it's happening in private. And the beauty of this preparation is that when your time comes, when the door opens, when the opportunity arises, you'll be ready. You won't have to scramble, you won't be unsure. You'll walk into it with the confidence of someone who's already been equipped. Because you didn't just show up, you grew up, you didn't just arrive. You were prepared, and that preparation happened when no one else was watching. Some of the most powerful warriors don't train on the battlefield. They train in silence, behind the scenes, and you're no different. The strength that will sustain you won't come from being seen. It will come from what you built in secret. So don't despise this time. Don't wish it away. Don't rush out of the season. Stay with it. Let it do its work. Let it shape you. Let it build you. Because you're not alone. You're being equipped. And when you come out of this, people may look at you and wonder where the strength came from. They'll ask how you're able to handle so much, carry so much, walk in so much grace and wisdom. But they won't know about the quiet nights, the private battles, the unseen prayers. They won't know about the lonely moments when you could have quit but didn't. They won't see the refining, only the results. But you'll know. And more importantly, you'll know it wasn't just… It was what God did in you when you were alone. So lift your head. You're not behind. You're not lacking. You're not forgotten. You're being equipped. You're in the workshop of destiny. And when the time is right, you'll see that every moment alone wasn't wasted. It was necessary. It was divine. It was powerful. Being alone didn't weaken you. It prepared you for everything that's coming next. You may be in a season right now where it feels quiet. You may be walking a path where there's no crowd, no cheerleaders, no one checking in. And it's tempting to wonder if something's wrong, if you missed a step, if you've been left behind. But let me remind you, being alone is not a weakness, it's not a punishment, it's not a delay. It's a divine appointment, a sacred space, a holy preparation. In this place of solitude, you're being awakened to your true self. You're learning how to hear your own voice, trust your own path, and stand on your own strength. You're not being abandoned, you're being aligned. You're being aligned. You're not lacking, you're being loaded. You're not empty, you're being equipped. The silence isn't your end, it's the womb of your next beginning. You don't have to chase what was never meant to stay. You don't have to hold on to people who left when the light dimmed. The real ones will come, and when they do, they'll find someone who doesn't need to be filled, because you've already discovered your fullness in the quiet. You've grown in ways the world can't see. You've been refined in the fire of solitude. You found your ideas, your power, your identity, not in the crowd, but in the stillness. So don't be afraid to walk alone, don't panic in the silence. That's where strength is forged. That's where vision is born, that's where confidence is rebuilt. You are not behind, you are not forgotten. You are exactly where you need to be, because being alone is not a void, it's a vessel. And God is filling it with everything you'll need for where you're headed next. When the time is right, you won't walk out of this season empty, you'll walk out empowered. And when you do, you won't need to announce yourself. The power you gained in silence will speak for itself. Being alone isn't a sign that you're broken. It's the evidence that you're being built. And that, my friend, is